Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Representatives from the NYPD released wild body cam footage this week, following a dangerous chase with an accused car thief that easily could have resulted in the deaths of two people. The whole thing started just before 5 p.m. on August 18th, when NYPD officers attempted to perform a traffic stop on the suspect, later identified as 19-year-old Kia Richardson. At the time, Richardson was behind the wheel of a stolen white Infiniti sedan in Queens' Jackson Heights neighborhood. In the body cam footage, one of the officers has seemingly blocked Richardson in with his cruiser on 34th Avenue. After getting out of the vehicle, he draws his weapon and heads towards the stolen sedan, yelling for the 19-year-old to get out. Rather than complying, Richardson tries to escape. That's when all hell breaks loose. Without any warning, Richardson can be seen throwing the car into reverse, sending it speeding backwards into another vehicle and then the metal shutters of a building. As this is happening, the sedan flies over the sidewalk, very nearly hitting a young girl walking down the street with her mother. Another potentially deadly situation takes place just moments later as Richardson continues to turn around. He hits an officer while also crashing into another car, pinning the officer between the two vehicles and nearly crushing him. He then continues down the one-way street in the wrong direction, slamming into other cars as he goes. A short time later, Richardson reportedly abandoned the vehicle and ran for an elevated subway platform. The chase continued up a ladder and onto the rooftops of two nearby buildings, where the 19-year-old became trapped and finally surrendered. Following his arrest, Richardson was slapped with numerous charges, including attempted aggravated murder, reckless endangerment, vehicular assault, possession of burglar tools, and criminal possession of a weapon. As for the officer who was pinned between the cars during the chase, he reportedly suffered injuries to his hip and knee and was hospitalized. However, his injuries are said to be non-life-threatening. Authorities say that they are grateful because it's easy to see how the situation could have played out much worse. Representatives from the NYPD say that a 47-year-old pizza shop employee has been left in critical condition this week following an unhinged attack that started as an argument over an unleashed dog. The whole thing began shortly before 10 p.m. on August 19th, when the suspect, 35-year-old Tyshawn Watson, walked into Roma Pizzeria on 5th Avenue near East 19th Street. At the time, he was accompanied by his pit bull, which wasn't on a leash. He proceeded over to the indoor dining area and sat down with the animal. Noticing this, the 47-year-old victim, Zachariah El Sharif, tried to explain to Watson that he couldn't have the unleashed animal inside the business. According to witnesses, he apologized and offered the 35-year-old a table outside instead. Watson apparently reacted to this by cursing and screaming at Zachariah. As the employee attempted to lead Watson outside, he attacked without warning. Zachariah was knocked to the ground in a flurry of punches and kicks, and it wasn't long before the pit bull entered the fray as well. By the time authorities arrived at the scene, Zachariah was outside on the ground. He had managed to escape from the restaurant, though was allegedly knocked unconscious by Watson, who also allegedly choked him and stomped on his head. The 47-year-old was rushed to a hospital in critical condition with a number of serious dog bites. Watson, meanwhile, was apprehended along with his dog a short time after. He has now been charged with attempted murder and assault with attempt to cause disfigurement or dismemberment. Sadly, even days later, it's unclear if Zachariah will survive. According to the latest reports, he remains in a medically induced coma and is hooked up to a respirator. A GoFundMe set up for him by a co-worker states that Zachariah is a father and husband who had come to the U.S. to provide a better life and education for his family. Their future now reportedly remains uncertain, as they depend on his income to get by. The situation is still under investigation. Authorities in Gloucester County, New Jersey say that 3 people are successfully in custody and facing a number of serious charges this week after they allegedly planned and carried out a disturbing cross-country attack against a local woman. The whole thing began sometime on July 26th when the 42-year-old female victim, who has not been identified by name, returned to her home in the Forest Hill development in Monroe Township. After pulling into her driveway, she was getting out of her vehicle when suddenly she was approached by another woman. That woman tossed a container of highly caustic acid onto the 42-year-old before running back to a nearby getaway vehicle being driven by a man. She got inside and the pair took off, leaving the victim screaming in agony for help. According to police, she suffered severe chemical burns to over 35% of her body and has been in the hospital ever since. Following an extensive investigation, authorities in New Jersey reportedly traced the case more than 900 miles to Florida. This is where they allegedly discovered the twisted plot behind it. Specifically, police now allege that the victim's ex-boyfriend, 49-year-old William DeBernardino, hired a pair of Jacksonville residents, 38-year-old Betty Jo Lane and 39-year-old Jamar McNeil, to carry out the brutal attacks. DeBernardino reportedly arranged for the couple to drive a rental car to New Jersey for the sole purpose of trying to kill his former love interest. This week, it was announced that DeBernardino, Lane, and McNeil had been arrested and that all of them are now facing a laundry list of charges. These include conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault, and stalking, as well as a weapons charge. Currently, no specific motive has been released behind the disturbing crime. All three of the accused are now awaiting extradition to New Jersey. Representatives from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation released a shocking update in the nearly year-old murder case of an elderly woman this week, announcing that they had arrested 2 local teenage girls in connection with the case. According to reports, the investigation began on September 3rd, 2023, when family members of 93-year-old Joanne Johnson made a horrifying discovery. The elderly woman was found dead inside of her home on the 1700 block of Robbins Street in the small city of Augusta. Little information was released at the time the crime was uncovered, though it was soon revealed that police were treating the situation as a murder. It also became clear that there wasn't going to be a quick resolution to the case. As months passed, the state's governor authorized a $5,000 reward, one that was eventually doubled when Joanne's family decided to match it. That's where things stood until this week, when authorities announced that they had arrested 2 people in connection with the murder, both of whom are 14-year-old local girls. Unfortunately, despite this major update, not much else has been released at the time of this recording. We don't know what evidence led to the arrests or what the alleged motive behind the murder was. The only other information we have comes from the father of one of the 2 accused girls, who gave an interview to a local media station after the arrests. He claims that his daughter and her friend have been falsely accused, and that they are actually also victims in the case. He says this belief comes from the statement his daughter gave to police, in which she claimed that an unknown man had approached her and her friend in the park on the day of the murder and coerced them into going to Joanne's house. Once there, this man apparently killed the 93-year-old with an axe in front of the teens. Of course, whether there is any truth to this version of events remains to be seen, as we still don't know what evidence authorities have collected. Right now, the names of the 2 girls have not been published, though that could change if they are charged as adults. In the meantime, they remain held at 2 separate juvenile detention facilities. As for the friends and family members of Joanne Johnson, they say that they are stunned by the development. In a statement, her son called the news inexplicable, likening the situation to, quote, getting struck by lightning on a cloudless day. The 93-year-old is remembered as a devoted mother and grandmother who took a real interest in other people. As one neighbor put it, quote, she would talk to you for a couple of minutes and she'd know where you're from, where you went to school, what you were doing, and what you wanted to do. And the next time she'd talk to you, she'd remember every one of those things. You know, the type of person a lot of us aspire to be. I know I do. Authorities in Amherst County, Virginia released a heartbreaking update in the disappearance of a local woman this week, announcing that after more than a year, they had recovered her remains hidden on the property of her last known address. The case began on June 26, 2023, when family members of Elsie Wigington reported her missing. The 45-year-old grandmother had not been heard from for several days, and loved ones said that they were unable to reach her. They stated they were especially concerned because the last time she had contacted them, she was afraid for her life. The family members told police that they suspected Elsie's husband, Frederick Wigington, had something to do with her disappearance. They explained that their relationship had quickly soured after their 2019 marriage, and that Frederick was physically, verbally, mentally, and financially abusive. At the time she went missing, the 45-year-old had been preparing to leave him for good and move to Maryland. 3 days before her disappearance, she texted her foster sister saying, quote, "He's going to kill me." Despite these suspicions, it appears that progress was slow to be made in the case. It's not clear exactly why this was, though it has since been alleged by Elsie's loved ones that the previous sheriff's administration simply refused to properly investigate. That apparently changed under the recently elected sheriff, Jimmy Ayers, who obtained warrants to conduct extensive searches of a residence on Pendleton Drive, where Elsie lived with her husband at the time that she went missing. It was here, last week, where her remains were tragically recovered under a concrete slab somewhere on the property. Elsie's remains were positively identified this week, resulted in charges being filed against Frederick Wigington. He was arrested in Augusta County and is now facing charges including concealment of a body, murder, and use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. At the time of this recording, many questions still remain about the awful crime, including the exact cause and circumstances of Elsie's death. Thankfully, though, it appears that the case is now finally being properly investigated. Authorities in Maricopa County, Arizona say that a would-be bandit was quite literally caught with his pants down this week when he and an accomplice attempted to steal a motorcycle but were foiled by some pretty embarrassing home surveillance footage. According to reports, the whole thing began shortly before 7 a.m. on August 14th, when homeowner Crystal Hobish was notified about some movement that had been picked up by her front door surveillance camera. She took a look at the footage, only to get the surprise of her life. There were two strange men on the driveway who were in the middle of trying to steal her husband Eric's motorcycle. The man had clearly come prepared for the theft and had a car with a trailer waiting at the bottom of the driveway. As Crystal was about to learn, one thing they clearly didn't bring, though, was a belt. As one of the men worked to get the bike down the driveway, his pants comedically fell down, exposing his full butt to the camera. As surreal as the situation was, Crystal didn't hesitate and immediately jumped into action. As she was dialing 911, she also began banging on her front window. To her relief, this was enough to scare off the bumbling burglars, who left the bike and took off in their vehicle moments later. When police arrived, the men were gone, though the attempted theft had been immortalized on the surveillance video, butt crack and all. That footage has now been released both to help identify the perpetrators and, well, quite frankly, because it's funny. Speaking about the situation afterwards in an interview, Eric told reporters, quote, "I want this video to get as much exposure as possible. Exposure because of the butt, but as many people to see the video as possible so we can find these guys and hopefully get them some good-fitting pants in jail." He also said that he has since started locking up his motorcycle at night. Authorities in Nassau County, New York say that 5 members of the same family are dead this week, including the gunman, following a tragic shooting that allegedly took place during a dispute over the sale of a Long Island home. The situation unfolded at around noon on August 25th at a property on Wyoming Court in the town of Syosset. Neighbors began calling 911 after they heard an unsettling disturbance there. According to witnesses, screaming and wailing could be heard coming from inside, followed by several gunshots. The disturbing sounds continued when a man that they recognized as one of their neighbors walked outside into the front yard carrying a gun. Moments later, he turned the weapon on himself. When police arrived at the scene, they found the man lying outside unresponsive. Things got even more horrifying when they went inside the house and found 4 other people, all of whom were also suffering from gunshot wounds. Sadly, none of them could be saved, and all were pronounced dead from their injuries. At the time of this recording, this is very much a developing story, and none of the names of those involved have been released. However, it's been reported that all 5 of the deceased were members of the same family. As for what happened, that's still being investigated, but here's what we know so far. According to local media sources, the gunman was the eldest son of the owner of the property, 95-year-old Teresa de Lucia. Teresa had recently passed away, and her funeral had only been held this past Friday, August 23rd. It's believed that family members were in the process of getting affairs in order and going through Teresa's will, part of which included plans to sell her home. They had apparently arranged for a real estate agent to come and meet with them the same day that the incident took place. Neighbors say that Teresa's eldest son was distraught over his mother's death and had lived in the Syosset home with her all of his life. He suffered from mental health issues, and it's now thought that a dispute over the sale of the house is what led to the shooting. Currently, police are still at the property investigating, though they are scheduled to make an announcement sometime on August 26th, meaning that new details will likely be available at the time of this video's release. Authorities in Seattle, Washington say that a 25-year-old man is facing charges this week after he was accused of brutally murdering his girlfriend while high on drugs inside of his home earlier this month. The case began shortly before 10:30 a.m. on August 10th, when police began receiving calls from concerned residents in Seattle's Lake City neighborhood. Several people asked if they could send someone to check on their neighbor, 25-year-old Andy Chu. There was water flowing out from inside his condo, and no one was able to get a hold of him. When officers arrived at the scene and made their way inside, they followed the source of the water to one of the condo's bathrooms. That's where they made an awful discovery. Lying on the floor was the partially clothed body of a young woman, later identified as 25-year-old Zoe Suyun Hee. The scene was as strange as it was disturbing. According to reports, Zoe had an ice pack on her throat, and there was a block supporting the back of her head. A granular substance, later determined to be acai powder, was all over her body, and a smooth, polished ball, a little larger than a golf ball, had been shoved deep into her mouth. She had injuries to her face, head, neck, and chest, consistent with a violent attack, though medical examiners have since determined her actual cause of death was asphyxiation. The tub in the bathroom was full of water, and the sink was on full blast. Authorities learned that Zoe had been dating Andy Chu for the past few months, and she had recently flown in from Hawaii to visit him. When they received surveillance footage at the condo complex, they found a video of the pair entering the property together the previous afternoon carrying some groceries. That morning, Chu had left the residence alone, carrying what appeared to be a towel underneath his shirt. Chu was ultimately tracked down on August 11th when police received a call about an assault at a local hospital. Chu had been taken there by some friends the previous day after leaving his home because he was behaving erratically. This behavior continued at the hospital, where he allegedly groped a nurse and tried to pull her head down by hooking one of his arms around the back of her neck. When questioned about what had happened between him and Zoe, Chu reportedly admitted to smoking marijuana and taking MDMA the day before while they were together. Though he claimed he couldn't remember exactly what had happened, he said he, quote, thought he might have killed his girlfriend, and that he had a, quote, memory of choking her, twisting her neck, holding her down underwater in the tub. He went on to say that after attacking Zoe, he had pulled her out of the water and tried to revive her by sprinkling acai powder on her and placing a ball in her mouth to fix her jaw. At the time of this recording, Chu has been charged with first-degree murder and first-degree assault. Zoe's heartbroken family back in Hawaii say that she was just days away from celebrating her 26th birthday at the time that she was murdered. They say they don't really know Chu, but that he and Zoe had gone to high school together. The situation is still under investigation. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.